Hey there, rulers. Welcome back after a long week of Force of Will to the Teacher's Lounge, your favorite ever live Force of Will podcast featuring myself, and I am joined this week by Billy Buttons. And then I got Brandon Bremont down there. And I got Mike Rance down below me.
I'm over here. There's Jeremy.
I'm in the upper right corner this time instead of the upper left. It's a new world. Here we are. Before we get started, as always, I want to thank you guys so much for being here and for supporting us. If you feel like supporting us even in a more direct fashion, you can consider joining as a member here on YouTube. There's that little join button right down below the video. Get you access to all kinds of cool perks, including being able to be a part of our chats, which is always a ton of fun. Gives you access to the emotes and everything else. At the higher tiers, you get access to things like merch, deck doctoring, featuring your decks here on the channel, all kinds of cool stuff, and it goes to directly support us. The other little bit of shilling I have to do tonight is the fact that the Alternate Souls Kickstarter is currently live. They have been live for 3 days and are already over 75% of the way funded. This is the My Will Studios Direct, not working with Japanime on this one. It is just them directly working on it. I think that they've made some pretty big improvements. I think there's going to be, I personally really enjoy the game. I know not everyone does, but I think that they're on a really good track to succeed. So go ahead and click that link down below to check it out and consider being a part of this new project for EG and Jeff. So
I think it's already, 70% funded right now? So go have at it, guys. We're almost there.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got 17 days left to earn just under 15K, which is, and their overall goal is just over 47K. So they have been doing an amazing job. There's even a bunch of I think there's like 6 or 7 of the mega plates, the giant mega plates still available. So if you're a Machina fan, Gil Alhamat, Welser, I think there's a Millium one is available too. You can go ahead and check those out. Those are like the highest tier rewards for some really awesome stuff. I do want to say,
we got the zeros.
Yeah, I know. There is a Lilius pedal though, so if you're a Lilius pedal fan, I only got one of the 2, so you can still have the other one. So I do want to say, Zero the Master, welcome to being a student here. Your curriculum here, you can go to the principal's office, pick up your curriculum, and then go to class. We're happy to have you here as a student at Ruler School. So
I know who that is.
I don't, but I might, but anyway. So tonight I want to talk about this idea. We're going on a fishing trip, gentlemen. It's time for a staff fishing trip, specifically a gold fishing trip, because this is something that's been brought up by the community a couple times recently as a suggested topic, and it's really not something we've talked about here on the channel before, and it's being done a lot right now, especially with everything going on in the world of quarantine. It's the idea of gold fishing. So I do kind of want to explain what goldfishing is, and then...
Please, Jeremy, you are the only dad here, so you have to give us all fatherly wisdom on the
yes.
subject of fishing.
I have to do... Yes, I gotta get my fishing waders on and everything. Now you see, you gotta be real quiet.
Get your bucket hat.
Yeah, gotta get the bucket hat.
It.
So... for those of you who aren't aware, goldfishing is this idea of shuffling up your deck without an opponent and running through your first 3 to 4 turns, just imagining kind of what your curve looks like, imagining what kind of play lines you might look like, so that you can start to get a feel for your deck, or maybe feel for what your first few turns are going to look like. So then you can start to differentiate what maybe makes a good hand or a bad hand, without even being able to sit down, without even having to worry about sitting down across from your opponent. This is a thing that a lot of people do when they are traveling, specifically pretty much all of us here, when we are waiting for planes or anything else like that. It's also
tray table down.
Yeah, put that tray or on a plane, I guess, if you feel like taking that risk.
Turn your tables to gold fishing positions.
Yeah, but yeah. You tray table down and in the gold fishing position. That's nice. But it is something that is not exclusive to Force of Will, but I will say that I think Force of Will presents some unique challenges when it comes to this concept. But overall, I kind of think I'll open up to the 3 of you guys. What has been your experience, or kind of how do you view the concept of gold fishing, and maybe some tips or tricks that you have, or things that you've experienced in trying to goldfish for Force of Will that we can try to pass on to the community.
Yeah, I think I've got a kind of a weird basis on it, because I came to Force of Will from Yu-Gi-Oh originally, and Yu-Gi-Oh is one of those games where it's you goldfish because your deck plays one combo, and once you do the combo, your opponent just has to answer it, and if they can't answer it, then you win. If they can't answer it, you lose. Pretty straightforward there.
Break my board.
Yeah, the game. Or, go to get OTK'd. But most of the time I've noticed that goldfishing really only matters heavily in, say, like, a tempo or combo deck, I would say. Like decks that, if your deck wants to play on curve, being able to goldfish, just make sure that, you have your 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, or, just plays that you can do at those times is one of the best ways to do it. Am I saying that tempo is the best way to play right now? Forcible's gotten to a point where it's really interactive, and that's kind of where I think this analogy falls off. Because one of the big things that you'll get, like say you're playing Wander and you're playing Umar combo, you can goldfish the hell out of that because it's just the same thing over and over again. You just have to learn how to regurgitate that information. But if you're playing something like, Alter decks, if you're playing like, Kaguya decks where you have, the chance to play your Kaguya for tempo or not play it or save it for cancel, and then you have the access to your rune deck where you can have Chant of Tranquility. Knowing when to do that when you're just kind of like shuffling your deck and throwing it onto the board yourself is almost meaningless when most of the challenge of playing the Kaguya comes from interacting with your opponent. And I think it's a tough basis for it, I would say, because you don't really get to just learn how to regurgitate info or just learn how your deck's probabilities work. Most of the intricacies and most of the playing the deck well will only come from interactions, it's tough to do when you're alone.
Yeah, that's very true. Fremont, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I'm going to make a comment that I think a lot of people hopefully find at least a little bit funny. I usually lose when I goldfish when I'm playing by myself. and I'm being dead serious because the best way that you can goldfish is you open your hand and you don't have a real opponent against you. So I could just say, my opponent calls a basic water magic stone and passes. My opponent calls a basic water magic stone and passes. My opponent calls a basic, etc., etc. And that's not very useful because obviously I'll beat that phantom opponent every time. When I play test, my opponent always has the Kaguya on 2. They always explored into the next one. They always had the altar. They always had the Rhea for the Sigurd if I left nothing up, etc., etc. And so you want one of the best ways that you can goldfish is using it as a way to really ascertain your outs. And like, my opponent just drew the Stone Cold Nuts. How does my mediocre hand handle that? Like how do I maximize my chance of winning against every stage of the nuts? And I think that that's more useful than just, my opponent is brain dead and I am, playing the most optimal way I can possibly play. I'm just slamming my regalia on 2. I'm doing whatever. And that gives you a sense of what's going to happen in the GP, because if you plan for the worst case scenario, then when things are better than that, you will find it's easier. It's Naruto dropping the I haven't actually seen the show. Yeah, okay. See, I started to make that reference, then I realized that like there's likely actual Naruto likers here, and they probably would correct me, but whatever. Dropping my
actually,
actually.
It was actually Naruto's son.
Yeah,
I love Boruto's dad. It's my favorite show.
Yeah. Anyway, but like if you play as if your opponent's always got it, then it will feel a lot easier in a GP when they don't actually always have it, which I find nice. So
yeah,
that's how I like to do it. At least
you can play to the worst case scenario, and if you always are prepared for it, then you're just gonna do well.
Yep. I think there's kind of 2 stages to how to approach your goldfishing, and that's like if you're goldfishing when you're first building a deck, the concept is kind of what Mike has been talking about, I think, of like what's your curve, right? Like how is your deck curving? Are you finding the right balance of cards? So like in that regard, you're kind of doing like stage 1, which is you don't really care what your phantom opponent is doing. You're really just looking at your deck and saying like, okay, do I have a 1-drop? Do I get a turn 2? Do I get a turn 3? Is my ratio off so that I'm not really playing a card until turn 3? If that's the case, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And do I need to tweak my deck based on that, right? Like, do I need to figure out, what my deck's like turn on turn is? And so I think for that consideration, you don't really necessarily need to ask yourself what's like the worst case scenario. But I would say that that's like the warm-up of goldfishing. Like that's not where the true meat and potatoes of goldfishing lies. It's kind of where you're always asking yourself, what is the best thing my opponent can do okay, they did that. What do I do now? Like, it's always asking, like you said, putting yourself in that worst case scenario to find out what your outs are, to find out how that might manipulate your play, to find out how you could potentially recover. And I think for force of will, that is like the bigger part of goldfishing than anything else. Yu-Gi-Oh is very much a build it to break it kind of thing. Like, I build my board, can my opponent break it? I build my board, can my opponent possibly break it? You know, that kind of thing. But
also, there's some ego where people might not like to admit that, like, oh, I completely understand all the math in my deck and all the interactions that my deck has because I'm so good at this game or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, like, I sat down and did Magnus Angel math for like a solid 45 minutes on that plane trip. Like, where I had Magnus Angel and I had X things out here and I had some access to some amount of mana, some ability to remove cards, some amount of Awakening of the Wing Lords to recover it. And like, I'm like, all right. How, like, where do the numbers become lethal for Magnus Angel? And like, part of that was just holding. What was that?
The numbers made. What do they mean?
Exactly. And so, like, there was some amount of goldfishing where I was just like, looking at a Magnus Angel and some numbers of scenarios and like where, like, how lethal is this? And I can't figure that out in my tiny pea brain. Like, I have to run through that several times to really get the hang of it. So that's another good use of goldfishing.
Yep. I think that there's this element of I wouldn't consider that goldfishing and testing are anywhere close to the same thing. I would say they complement each other very, very well. Because I think that there's a part of goldfishing too that comes with kind of like what you're saying, Brandon, of like feeling comfortable or like running through the lines to like start to make sense of like what decisions am I going to need to be making, what are the things that I need to be considerate of, everything else. And I think that if you walk in already having identified those questions, already having identified those thought patterns, and then you sit down to playtest, suddenly your playtesting can, when you're against an actual person, can be a lot more focused, right? Because you've worked through, like, you kind of cut out the additional noise that you really don't need to be thinking about, and you can focus on just exactly what you've identified as like the important pieces. Because it's very easy in testing when you bring a new deck to the table or a deck that you haven't worked out to just like not really benefit from testing very much because you're still A, getting used to the deck, B, not even really quite sure, you know, where the deck's weaknesses naturally lies, C, not really sure about what the play, like not feeling comfortable like naturally in the play lines, things of that nature. And when you goldfish, it like trims the fat, as it were, to prepare you for when you actually sit down to do the full testing. And I think to that end, that is something that can help players get better, especially the influx of new players that we have seen. Because I don't know about you guys, but like I'm looking at the Facebook group and I'm seeing a lot of new people like mentioning that they're wanting to get in. We saw a lot of new faces at the GP in Collinsville. Like
a lot of new player questions have been coming through. That,
yep.
You know, things that look
popping off.
Yep. There's a lot of people that like would see the questions and be like, that's pretty obvious, but then it's like you don't realize how many new players are in there. Come on, man.
Zero saying, Logan says, stage 1, does my deck function? Stage 2, do my lines function? I think that's...
and then Logan stages for most of his decks, no, then yes.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty, you know, a pretty...
Doesn't matter if your deck functions, as long as your lines work, that's fine.
Hey man, sometimes you just gimmick your way through to a win. Sometimes messy works. Don't count on it, but sometimes messy works.
I'm the king of does messy work? Sometimes.
Nights work.
Yeah, Knights made everything messy. Did you hear about my 25-minute turn 0 at Collinsville?
I'm sorry. Back up.
We went to time. I was playing against Arla. They hit the God's Art, and I said, I can kill you, but this is going to take a while. 25 minutes later, I had filled my graveyard up to the point where I could just Loki and then exile their Ares in the same turn, and then I won. But it took 25 minutes to get to that point because I hadn't actually launched the altar loop until like round 3 or 4, whenever it was. So I learned how to altar loop on the fly in the middle of a game, and then I won.
So good.
If it works and it's messy, is it really messy? It's really messy.
What a mess.
for sure.
So
And
good.
that wouldn't happen, or it would be at least a little bit more practiced if maybe Billy had goldfished a little. But also,
Whoa! Look at Jeremy calling out Billy for not goldfishing on the plane.
just cycling around.
Alter's a fun deck to goldfish because like the number of Sigurds, Athenias, altars in your deck like matters, and like getting the hang of how many times you can do the loop based on the amount of mana you have and the number of iterations of each of those in your deck and whether or not you have Power of Immortality up, and like that I thought that was really fun to goldfish. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing is like, not everyone enjoys goldfishing. That's very, very fair. And the deck
I'm calling Billy out. Oh my god.
No, I'm not calling Billy out. I'm not calling Billy out for that.
TCG Prime is 24 minutes longer than Night Billy lasts.
Jeez Louise.
Yikes.
That's Dan, by the way. That's Dan.
Dan friggin' Roland. I can go to the lady. We can reclare. No, I'm sorry. This is a PG stream. I apologize.
Yeah, that's.
I got you later, Dan.
PG-13. I think you get what? Do you get one swear?
We get 0 swears. This is a maybe.
Yeah, PG-13. You get one, right?
We'll save the one for later. We'll
okay,
save it for
good.
later.
Save it for after dark.
Save it for the Teacher's Lounge after dark. So the one thing I think that Forza will is, you're absolutely right. You bring up an interesting point there, Brandon, in regards to like understanding the ratios of what's in your deck, how much have you popped off, what's your sequencing, because we've talked about this before in Force of Will, that like sequencing errors are so easy to do in Force of Will that you can just like you can literally just out sequence yourself because you're not feeling comfortable with it and put yourself in a situation that you didn't want to be. And so goldfishing in that regard helps a lot too for you to practice the sequencing as well. And like sometimes if you're playtesting with an opponent, I'll say this, right? Because if you're playtesting with someone, you also kind of want to be respectful of their time. And so like I will speak to my personal experience of being the playtest guy at Worlds like this past year. I was not having fun at all because, like, one, I'm not playing at all in the tournament. Two, I'm being thrown up against people who don't quite have a lot of practice with their deck, and I'm just wanting to play some Force Will a little bit. Like, I want to help them test, but I also just want to be playing. And so I literally sat there for like 15 minutes between turns while everyone at the table was just discussing back and forth like what the turn looks like, what the turn looks like, what the turn looks like. And I'm like, I just want to play some Force Will, guys. Like, can we just play, please? Like,
no.
Their motivations were a little different than yours, though.
That's fair.
They have more on the line than your
entertainment.
Yeah,
no, I think that's fair.
Moment.
But I think that, and like, so like that's the specific moment that like my experience, compensates them. But I also think that there are things that you can work through, like I said, that get you to a more fine focused testing by doing things like the goldfishing part, which is why I think that they complement each other really well. So shuffle up and practice is really like the biggest thing that I can say.
Wholeheartedly agreed.
Just really quick, because I have to take advantage of this opportunity whenever I can.
Sure.
Zero says, I admittedly only goldfish pure combo decks like Ad Nauseam and Manaless Dredge. Force of Will hasn't had a combo deck like that except Umer, and I'm not playing that. My friend, I must encourage you to go look at a card called Cheshire Cat's Assistance.
That's
and
the
then
most
go look at the results from the 2017 Washington Grand Prix, and then if you have any questions, come talk to me because that's the best deck of all time. And if you liked Manaless Dredge and Ad Nauseam, then you are in for a treat.
Thank you, Brandon. I am triggered.
Same.
Just glass.
Fucking Cheshire Cat's Assistant.
Glass cannon Alhamad. Go.
There's your one, Mike.
Oh no!
You've spent it.
Ruined it.
You've spent it. You're not allowed anymore.
I thought that was the best use possible.
Agreed.
Jeremy, can you just edit that out and post?
That deck was so painful because it's like all right, what's the best deck in the format? Fox or Prisha, obviously. And then the entire Braemont clan just strolls into Washington and they're like, hey, guess what? Turn 1, here's my deck. Like, excuse me? What just happened? I have a Chimera. Who cares? I have a Gil Alhamat. Who cares?
Yep.
I'm just crying. Forever crying.
Magic player. You're the last one that should be triggered here.
You're correct. I never played combo decks. I played other forms of degeneracy.
Playing that Alhamat deck felt like playing Yu-Gi-Oh.
Like Ad Nauseam is actually
close to my heart.
Ad Nauseam is a very direct comparison to that deck, though. Like horrifyingly direct, minus the storm count. Unless it used that too, and I just completely blanked that out of my memory.
Do we think that we have exhausted all of the topic about goldfishing, or is there anything else that we want to point out to people about it?
I really enjoyed the mechanical aspect that was mentioned, where it's like you do it to get in the motion, because if you get the motions down, the next step after, you do it 1,000 times, you get it wrong every 5 times, and then you do it 1,000 more times and you get it wrong once out of 10 times, and eventually you just don't get it wrong, and the next step is figuring out play lines, what to play around, like if like branching over to the, like what Brandon said, when someone's like, well, here's the optimal hand and you just got Look of Corruption 3 times in a row, what do you do now? It's like, well, I have this, so it turns into that. It's an underrated thing, I think. I think that goldfishing is very underrated.
It's good for learning and it's good for getting into the motion, but you cannot use it for mastering, and I think that's the big takeaway.
For sure.
But like
this we talk about how useful goldfishing is and how you should like go out of your way to goldfish and stuff. I think if you're like me and you're kind of obsessed with Force of Will, goldfishing is actually a little bit inevitable. Like I'll just find myself sitting at work in like lull periods. I have the privilege of having a job that sometimes like lets me just kind of sit there and have my own thoughts. And I will just naturally start goldfishing in my own brain. Like I cannot help but goldfish. It's just a part of my conscious at this point.
Yep, I feel that. I've been caught daydreaming at work. I've got shit to do all the time. I used the bad word again. I'm sorry, Jeremy.
It's okay.
I work in a trading card game store, and I'm trying to bring back Force of Will in my trading card game store, so I literally get to goldfish all day, physically.
How many blasting waves you got there, Billy? I see at least 2.
4.
Yeah.
That's a few.
Blasting waves, the stone that literally doesn't make sense. I'm convinced to this day it was a translation error, and they meant to put it on the red-blue one. I'm convinced. Like...
Oh.
Are we just like we can do this for days right now? I'm sorting through collections, man. I'm not gonna play with Jeremy.
These are the only 2 cards I have with me right now.
You know what? Wait, where'd it go? I had it out here a minute ago.
I have a card for Mike and a card for Billy. Perfect.
Hey. I was thinking of these from when people were saying that they were $80.
Yeah.
All right, Omega level flex. Omega level flex.
Yeah, I don't have one of those. That's the giant one. That's the giant gold one, yeah.
Yeah, that's Ryan's.
That's still misprinted.
Ryan's.
That's still misprinted, and I love it. Check out
it misprinted?
Check out the attack and the defense. She ain't a 10-10.
What is she?
She's an 11-14.
Oh. I don't own any other Lenin, so I do not know.
She's an 11-14.
Super solid.
It's the first time I've heard that too.
Yeah, all of the Lennis this season are 10-10s, and they're actually supposed to be 11-14s. So someone said, what are our feelings on the power level of AO4 so far, and do you think the 4th series set is the peak of power after DBV and the new one? So I think that AO4 is like the truest, to me, it feels like the truest OG Force of Will set that we've seen in a long time. Like, where we have, here's this ruler is very unique, this ruler has an ability and a theme tied to the ruler and not things beside the ruler, and here is the ruler's cool support package, but that support package can be used in other things. And I think that's where it differentiates itself from other Force of Will sets of like OG.
The biggest thing about it is that most of the cards are just on their own more powerful than other cards we've seen in the past.
Correct.
Which is why people immediately think of power level. But at the same time, it's like none of them are really like like they have synergies, but they're not like synergistic picks that you really get.
So like I think the biggest thing, like I said, is like comparing it to like an OG Force of Will set. This is a set where like the archetypes can exist outside their archetypes in other decks, which I think is something that OG Force of Will, for the most part, didn't really ever do, which is, you know, I think speaks to that. But like, I'll think through my thoughts and let Brandon kind of speak to this.
It's kind of a complicated answer, but like, is it the most powerful of the sets? It kind of depends on how you measure that. I mean, you look at the set 2 that brought with it the Machina deck and the Persia deck, which were arguably 2 of the best decks in that format. The next set brings with it this Arla deck, which has been one of the better deck sets in my opinion. I know the Europeans are going to disagree with me, but like, so if a set brings with it a lot of the cards required to make and the last set had Sigurd and the Rezzard package as well, which made the Kagi Alter deck. So my point still stands even without Arla, but so like if you think that a set brings in cards that warp the format, that doesn't make it any better than AO2 or AO3 in that regard. This set has a lot of generically really good cards. The Yggdrasil is obviously really good, but it really serves more to facilitate other decks in the sense that it's very good, but like there's no Yggdrasil deck, you know what I mean? Except for like maybe...
and it can't even like the other thing to note is like it's very clearly like thematically tied to kind of like the idea of Magna, but like also it has this like limitation where it can't search for Genesis, right? So it's like that's where you see like it's
like not a Magna card though, right? Like it's a Prisia. It's a card for decks that like really need their Regalian.
Exactly. Like it's
specifically, I think it's a card that's built for ruler based decks that want a judgment on turn 2, like
Faria Voltron.
Yeah, there you go. Faria Voltron.
Faria beats. But yeah, so like if you consider like just pretend that's the best card in the set. I don't know if that's true. Does that make this set ridiculously good?
No, because DBV exists. But
like I don't think this is anywhere near DBV if that's what we're going for. Like Kaguya, perfect Loki nonsense. Like
even the worst card in that cluster, the worst like super in that set was Isis, and that thing was terrifying.
Did you just say the worst? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Did you just
Genshin.
try to say that the worst super in DBV was Isis when the frickin' Vermilion Dragon exists?
Okay, you know what? You're right. Like, you're right. One of the worst. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said worst. One of the worst.
So the nice thing about AO4 is that it seems like a lot of problems are being answered. They printed Black Moonray, which was like a big concern because before then there was exactly one card that like specifically dealt with a ruler, which was
two really. We have Bloody Break.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
And then there's the 1-cost Machina card that can answer a J ruler. So you can reveal
that
nobody plays because at that point in time, because we were also in a format where like once a J ruler flips, it's kind of like okay. So like Machina wasn't really trying to play something like that, but we only had 2 real J ruler hate cards like consistent.
Fair, and they were what was the Machina one? Because I got in right after AO2.
So it's pay 1, instant speed sword art, and you also reveal a machine, and you can kill a target J/resonator entity with total cost of the machine or less. So if you reveal literally if you reveal literally any machine, you can kill a J ruler because a J ruler has a cost of 0.
Okay, so
that counts, then Prisia's also got a fight card for 1 green.
Yes, that's true. She has the one-sided Duel of Truth fight card.
Okay, so in that regard, there were 2 cards that were very, very specific to what could and couldn't play them. Like you needed machines, or it was black-red. So in theory, you could splash, Bloody Break. But now we have this, this single black, just very splashable card that just says, blow up your dude. Yeah, Blazer was in there too, but Blazer is again in that
4-cost black-red.
Yeah, splash thing like that. But Black Moonray I think is super cool because it takes us back to when like Reflect Refrain was everywhere, and then Black Moonbeam happened, and it's like, oh yeah, this is the total solution, and da 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 da. But what if it turns out to be what actually happened, where Reflect Refrain players were just like, hey, I can play this and I can tutor it.
Yeah, I think the thing for AO4 is that so far I haven't seen a threat in AO4 that I can't within a couple seconds give you some form of answer to it, or AO4 has shown me some kind of answer to it. At least like that it's not like, oh, this is literally unstoppable, right? I think that even there is a high amount of utility. I think that absolutely is something that we're seeing in AO4, and we saw it a little bit in AO3, but like with like Pierre and Mikage or Rhea and stuff like that. I think we're seeing it more in AO4s, that we're seeing a lot of utility, but also at the same time, like some of the utility doesn't necessarily feel easy. Does that make sense? Like it's, yes, I have utility, but it's not just like free utility, which I think is part of the benefit of like I'll take Black Moonray for example, right? It can kill a J Ruler, or it only hits Stranger Resonators, right? Right? So you have this one cost answer spell, but it's not like, it has some additional utility in the fact that it can also be used against something not a J Ruler, but also at the same time, if your opponent's just like, okay, I'm gonna just not play any Strangers, you're just like, well, okay.
Yeah. Like, and I guess more so in an angle of like post Valhalla block, because then you lose the runes, you lose divinity, whatever it is. So that's when it does become a lot more effective, because those decks don't play Strangers. They literally can't. But like with Magna coming out, like you can just play this as a 4 of in your sideboard, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna face Magna. Let's not get turn 1 Artemis. Like
TCG Prime, I actually think my fear is the exact opposite. So if they ban Alter, then we get slots control decks like the old blue-white Drago decks of MTG. I think Melgus is way better than anyone gives it credit for, and the Alter decks oppressed Melgus. Like, the reason we didn't see very much Melgus is because it just could never beat the Alter decks. But without Alter around, Melgus is still very, very good. I think only got better.
Yeah, I think so. But I also do think that, like, we've talked about this before, how like certain decks can change when a threat doesn't exist in the meta. So like my question becomes, if we lose Alter, then Arla can kind of potentially adjust itself to be able to better keep in check Melgus potentially.
Arla doesn't have to play Erendite anymore, so it like opens 4 slots for the new miscalc we're getting, the Schrödinger Scream. So I guess like, yeah, definitely those things are on the table. Melgus is going to get the playing card that hits for 4 with Death Touch Quick Cast. And potentially some other stuff. So like, like everyone gets better. It's a nuclear arms race. Like every new set gives everyone something.
Here's something interesting. I did want to mention that CCG Prime also did mention that we're talking about the best set in the cluster, not the most powerful set overall. But I think that after everything we've seen, I still think no matter what they've printed so far, AO3 is still just like top of the crop for me, because Mikage Rhea is an insane card. Like, that card is crazy.
Oh, yeah. It's actually nuts.
Yeah, I think so too.
Actually, the most disgusting card ever, like we've seen for the set.
Does Sigurd not just stay king, like, even after Alter rotates?
So really quick.
Schrödinger, blink Sigurd, Schrödinger, blink Sigurd, Schrödinger, blink Sigurd, Schrödinger.
So I'm gonna interject on the Schrödinger. I'm gonna interject on the Schrödinger Sigurd, and then I'm gonna let Brandon go. Billy, I want you to do that, and then as soon as you target your Sigurd with the second Schrödinger, I'm a Schrödinger's cry it, and we're gonna move on. But anyway, and then we're gonna go to Brandon. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Sigurd did a really funny thing where, like, right now there's like 3 editions it can find, right? Alter, the Sephiroth, and Nephilim. And then in this set, they've already printed 6 dark editions that cost 2 or less. 6 of them. There's literally, Sigurd has so many things he can find. Like, he literally more than doubled his repertoire, even if Alter doesn't get banned. If he did, they tripled it. It is incredible the amount of things that all Sigurd can find in this set.
All hail the king.
that coveted. Maybe that should have been my cosplay. I'm not that ripped though. Like I don't have to go into some serious weight training.
You can get there.
I think so. Yeah. Okay.
I do.
Good. I'll do the.
Absolutely.
You build it, I'll get that ripped by Minnesota.
Jeez, Louise.
I'll just be shirtless the whole time.
Get the makeup.
No,
like the
we need what
corrupted
everybody
face.
wants in this chat. We need Billy to play.
Make it friendly.
No, I know. Well, hang on. That comes later, after dark. No, I know what everybody wants. We want you to cosplay the real best card of AO3, Mikage Rhea Billy cosplay.
Okay, I can make that happen.
I do think that like the thing that we're seeing so far with AO4 has been there's almost kind of an element of there's not a lot of flavor text, which is a little bit sad. Like we just haven't seen flavor text on everything, which is a little bit weird. But like we lost Brandon. But I would say that like the flavor of like feel of cards has been very interesting. Like almost kind of more so present than anything else I've felt in AO4. Like in this game for a very long time. Like when I look at the Gil Lapis cards, when I look at the Gil Lapis support package, when I look at his flip side, everything else, like to me, I'm like, this is potentially dominating. Like it feels dominating, oppressive almost to like consider. And when you think about who Gil Lapis is as a character, you're like, oh, that probably fits in the fact that I should feel that way when I'm looking at this package. Magna is this kind of trying everything he can to save everybody, having access to so much magic, so much power, color for wise, everything else. And when you look at the stuff that we've seen so far from Magna, that kind of makes sense. A being who's
defensive stance is crazy. He's
a feeling, this feeling of like a being who's in everything, all everything, has access to everything, and we're seeing that from his package. So like flavor wise, I feel that from him. Dark Alice has always been a little bit insane, a little bit off the wall, a little bit zany, pretty much since her existence. And you look at
zany and drainy painy.
You look at her you look at her package right now, and that's very much how it feels. It's like playing games with your opponent, being very tricksy, being very off the wall, doing things in a very different order than you're normally sequenced to. So like flavor wise, I think that AO4 is probably the coolest set I've ever seen. But you are correct that there is a lot of like, it's about how applicable the utility becomes and like how much stuff needs to support the utility to push it through for like for finishing, right? Because it's very easy to do a very flashy combo with a lot of utility and choices, and in the end it does jack shit. Like that's very easy to do.
Oh, Jeremy uses one word.
Well, I used a bad word. But like
this is a Christian family friendly stream, Jeremy. Come on.
Yeah, it's fine. But
it's really easy to draw for my turn, call a stone, energize Royal Flesh, and just play the 5 on turn 1.
Right. You know, like
we love the proper gold fishing.
That's right. That's my gold fishing.
There you go.
We're looping it back around.
But you know, and I think that's the thing that we have to, you know, when I talk about looking at AO4, there hasn't, like I said before, there hasn't been a single card that I've looked at and said outright, this card by itself is unstoppable and will win me games. There's been a lot of cards that I go, man, this provides me with a lot of options, or man, if I get it set up properly, this card is very, very strong. I haven't seen just a by itself like this card wins me the game card that I can't at least, like I said, quickly be able to say, yeah, but there's an answer.
Do you see that? Do you say that when you look at the card Kaguya?
Yes.
The 3-drop Kaguya?
Yeah, the 3.
No,
the DVV Kaguya?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I say that. I look at Kaguya as a card and I go, oh yeah, this card.
So then, like, you don't look at Yggdrasil and think, like, this card is kind of format warping or anything like that.
No,
right.
I won't necessarily say that it. Let me change that. Like, I guess let me rephrase, clarify. I don't look at any cards and say, oh, this is going to have an impact on meta. I think that's a different question. I think that what I'm saying is I haven't seen a card that by itself I go, this card wins me the game. Like
get it out.
That card wins me the game.
Get it out
right.
of here.
Like there's nothing in this set that I look at it the same way that I have looked at any DBV card. Like nothing that I've seen so far has like caused that instinctive like, oh shit moment that I've had looking at the DBV stuff when it was spoiled, right? And I think
it's true.
And I think that that's the biggest thing. So like, this is, we got a few minutes left, so I will ask this question. So we have seen 4 of the 5 Marvel rares at this point. We've seen Yggdrasil, we've seen Grand Cross Reincarnation, we've seen Lenneth, and we've seen Schrodinger. I'm of the opinion, in looking at them, that these cards are good. I will not say that they are bad. They are good cards. I will say that some of them are better than others. I will say that some of them are very, very flashy. I personally haven't seen one of those that I think, if I don't have a playset of them, I'm screwed. That's my opinion in looking at them.
I agree. The nice thing about them is like they're not. I remember when Marvel Rare first got announced, and like us and some other people were like, what if it's their cards that have to be in all decks? What if these cards are just so like flagrantly overpowered that everybody needs a playset of each one in their deck to be competitive? And it's really reassuring that that's not the case.
Yeah.
Like even from a vendor point of view, I'm really, really happy that that's not how it is.
Yeah.
Because like one, it would create like a horrible side effect on a market, and that's not good. Like we've seen that in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like maybe if you haven't, let me give you an example. There's a card coming out in the next upcoming set that's a secret rare, which means there's 2 secret rares per box, and it's an $80 card, and it's a 3-up. Like it's a format warping card. I'm glad that Force of Will does not have that problem with this set as it stands. And I don't think the next Marvel Rare is going to do that either, which is really reassuring to me.
And I'll follow up my statement in the saying that, do I think that if you have Marvel Rares in your deck, you are not gaining some kind of advantage? That I will disagree with that. I will say that if you can get Marvel Rares in your deck, it will most likely give you at least some kind of power, right? But yeah, against someone who doesn't have them. But I don't think that if I walked into a tournament, at least from what I've seen of the Marvel Rares, I don't think that if I walked into a tournament with a deck without Marvel Rares, that there would be no chance of me top 8ing. Like that's the point that I'm trying to make, that I feel about it, and so I would be interested to hear your feedback as well. It sounds like Billy kind of agrees with me. So, Mike, Brandon, what do you guys think?
So I think like this is somewhat obvious, but like because I've kind of said this card a billion times now. The one I'm the most worried about is Yggdrasil, especially if we get an early rotation or an altar ban, and then like. Which I'm hoping happens, and then we get to play AO, the Alice Cluster. I feel like Yggdrasil is very, very good, and a lot of decks are going to really desire a 4-of it. And so I think that one has me a little bit scared. I think that if Sigurd decks are still good, they're probably going to want 4 Schrodingers. And just the fact that you need 4 of that is kind of annoying. The other ones, I don't actually think Grand Cross Reincarnation is like that insane, and I don't think Lenneth is even a 4.
Lenneth's probably like a 1 or 2 of them. You just want to like grab it off of.
Yeah, it feels like an old school Schrodinger. Yeah, it feels like an old school like Dark Alice Goddard Schrodinger kind of thing.
So I mean, like I'm kind of waiting to see what the Marvel Rare distribution is, like how often you get them. And then also we're going to see, can decks actually get away with Yggdrasil? I'm kind of hoping that like the format turns in such a way that they can't. But if they can, then that's going to be a very difficult one to get a hold of. And I'm going to hope that they are generous with their distribution.
I think...
So here's a question. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I kind of agree. I agree to an extent with Brandon that especially like if we get that early rotation, that Yggdrasil is going to have much more of an impact because... every deck feasibly can run it.
Sure.
But I also think that the biggest point to get across is that I think Yggdrasil is only really useful in, first of all, the rulers that can judgment for 0 off of their regalia coming into play. Like the fact that you
not
can
the new ones.
Not the new ones. I don't think the new ones want to use Yggdrasil, which is fun flavor too, because Yggdrasil is a magnet card. Haha, yay. But I think it's specifically best in stuff like, I think I mentioned before, Malgus. Valentina, surprisingly, is another one that I think can run it very well, because you have the tap ability to produce mana for your regalia, and having a regalia that's good cast means that you don't have to wait the extra turn to put it into play, which is interesting.
Utterly shocked if there's any version of Valentina, Priscia, Melgus, or Arla that doesn't want a playset of Machina too. I think that is at least 5 of your rulers that are almost certainly going to want to play.
Yeah, I think that like I said, I'm going
to fight you on the Machina one because Maribella exists.
Maribella exists, but the problem with Maribella is that like it hits graveyard hate if you actually use it to find the Machina. Like you'd rather find the backup one with it and then cast it and then activate your Maribel so you don't
maybe. It depends on how fast you want to play the Machina deck, and I think if the format shapes out the way it does, I think you want to play it fast.
Yeah, and
that's the only thing that I'm thinking.
And that's the one thing for me with
plus that deck is just like even more dependent on its regalia than most decks. Like I think that deck definitely wants a playset of Yggdrasil.
Right.
I don't know though.
I don't know about playset. I think maybe like 1 or 2 of them to complement the Maribel, because I think the Maribel is still the best way to start. Well, Maribel is probably, in my opinion, still the most surefire to get decks intended and cushion out, because you have to remember that you're also losing a lot of the decks.
Maribel's what you play. Like if you were the Machina deck and they said no caps on Maribels, like how many do you play in that deck? And I think the answer is the vicinity of 8. I mean, like the deck is that desperate for the regalia, and I think that Yggdrasil like sometimes is better than Maribel, like occasionally.
Maybe
so, yeah. Because you get to get the mana on turn 2. Like on 1, you'd rather play the Yggdrasil, because then next turn when you call your stone and get it, you still have the mana up after you play the Maribel, which could be used to discard the Maribel from your hand, or could be used to play like any old 1-drop or hold up Erendite if we haven't rotated yet. I don't like the Yggdrasil is just I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's.
I've gone on a lot about this, so I'll like kind of lay this topic to rest now. But like, that's the only one I'm worried about is the long and short of it.
Right, and I think the thing for I agree with a lot of the points that you're making about Yggdrasil. I think that my follow up is that like the point that like eases my mind at least is the sense that there are cards for pretty much every ruler that facilitate regalia grabs, right? So like ultimately the most efficient regalia grab is Yggdrasil, but it's not like every other deck doesn't have some kind of regalia grab without Yggdrasil, right? And I think that to me is what I'm talking about in the sense of like, if I have to choose between playing a deck with Yggdrasil and playing a deck without Yggdrasil, like clearly playing Yggdrasil is going to give me a little bit of a buff, but am I absolutely freaking out of luck if I don't have Yggdrasils to be able to do what I want to do? And I think that's the big question that I find myself asking. And honestly, I don't know for sure.
I'm not sure either.
I am known for being incredibly optimistic, and to the point of I won't let anyone say anything negative, but like I'll agree that there is potential risk here with the Marvel rares. I was one of the first people, at least in private, to say like I'm a little bit concerned about the potential power level of these cards, anything else like that. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I'm not terrified of them.
We have seen that Marvel rares do come as full arts
and non-full
makes
arts.
Me exactly like there's a non-full art and full art version of Marvel rares, which makes me somewhat hopeful that they're not going to be like
one per
type, not exactly like, because then that'd be a little silly to have both full arts and not full arts. So I don't know.
Right, I agree. We'll have to wait and see. Ultimately we're waiting on pulled rates, and we've had that conversation before. We'll just have to see what we have. That is actually. Go ahead.
It also kind of like comes into play that the fact that I think one of the big arguments that's going to come up with.
I agree very much, Lars.
Yes. Sorry. But I think one of the big arguments that's going to come up with Yggdrasil is that it clearly at getting regalia it's much better than all the personables. We've seen that. We know that. But at the same time, Percivals also have those dual purposes, essentially. Like, all of them can grab a Regalia or X. And it's like, I think
and Yggdrasil also taps for mana for Regalia. Like, that's a pretty big upside.
Hey, we're not talking about tap. Talk about searching.
Okay.
But the tapping is really important, especially because everything can Judgment on 2 for 0 if you're using those. But I think one of the big things is that, like, if your deck specifically has things that Percival can search out, I think there's an actual, like, reason to think about running either of them. Like, I don't think the answer is as obvious if your deck is like, I don't know, for sake of example, I don't know if this is ever going to be relevant again, but Persia having Huang Long being searchable for the red Percival. Like, it's like marginal, but it's at the same time, you get to search out a high tempo card on turn 2.
Rather have your Percival be able to get something else if it misses the Regalia, or just never miss the Regalia. Like, I don't.
Right.
This argument that, like, Percivals could hit other things, like, is meaningless to me, because you would have always rather it hit the Regalia, and, like, the only reason the hitting other things was even good was because sometimes you didn't hit the Regalia. Yggdrasil cannot not hit the Regalia. Like, that's what's like. So this argument about what else Percivals can hit doesn't mean anything. Like, even on top of that, it taps for mana for the Regalia. Like, that's better than anything any of the Percivals did. Like, even, I don't know.
We'll have to
Who
see,
knows what
right?
happens.
Like, we'll have to see. And I think I agree with you that at this point in time, the one that I have my eye most trained on is Yggdrasil, because of the fact that it can go into so many things and because of the things that we have to talk about. You know, but it again, at the end of the day, the question becomes, you know, how many per box are we talking about, which then influences their price, which then influences, you know, what we can do. And we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Billy over there, how many pre-release kits you order? Like, what, 14?
It was 10 and then it became 15.
Yeah, like, that's a lot of lot of pre-release kits.
Yggdrasil's actually the exact reason of that.
Yeah.
to be honest with you, I want to up my chances of acquiring that card, like, in general. A, as a vendor. B, as in, I want my set. Yeah, I like flashy things. I want my 15
set. Pre-release kits and not have a place of Yggdrasil, then we have a problem. So
yeah, then we have a bunch. Yeah, there we have a real problem.
Oh, we'll have pre-release rates day of, as soon as I have those kits, because we won't be ready to run our pre-release in store. I'm saving 2 or 3 for the store after I get, like, demos and everything up and running, so we can actually, like, have people come out. But I'm still cracking, like, 12 pre-release kits.
So that's, you know, we're gonna have to wait and see. I know that we are gonna be cracking open a full case during my birthday weekend stream that we're gonna do for AO4. That'll be fun. We're just gonna have to wait and see what happens. You know, in true Force of Will fashion, we could see that a case, as ever, gets you a full play set of everything, including Marvel rares, especially since we lost 4 super rare slots to 5 Marvel rares. And we've gone up to 36 pack boxes. We'll just have to wait and see. But all in all, you know, there's speculating to be done and hype to be done, and I think I can speak for all 4 of us here, and correct me if I'm wrong, that, like, AO4 looks like a ton of fun to play, and I am very much looking forward to playing all 3 rulers, with or without early rotation. I'm very much looking forward to playing all 3 rulers. But that is going to do it for us tonight. As always, thank you guys so much for being here. If you enjoyed what we did tonight, consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the join button to consider supporting us that way. And also be sure to check out the Alternate Souls Kickstarter. They are, again, just under $15,000 away from their goal, with 17 days left to go. They've only been live for 3 days and have already broken 75% of their goal. EG and Jeff and My Will Studios are working really hard on it, to go check that out. But until next time, this has been myself, Jeremy Franklin, and I have been joined by Billy Buttons, sorting a collection, Mike Rance, drinking some wine.
It's all gone now, buddy.
And Brandon Bremont, eating some Thai food. So until next time, this is us saying, class dismissed. Have a good night, everybody.